Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Christina Lengel, and with me today is our Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. So, Kristen, we are finally seeing some legislation around the much discussed and promised non-medical adult use marijuana plan for the state. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it's turning out?
Sure. So the House hit a really big milestone this week in the fact that they actually passed a legalized weed bill. This would be allowing anybody in the state 21 and older to go and purchase weed for their recreational use, no medical use required. And this is something that Pennsylvania has been behind in, kind of like a lot of things, really. But, all of our neighbors have some form of this. And I think it's no surprise when we all probably have heard of people just crossing the border into New Jersey or Maryland or Delaware or everywhere except for West Virginia, I believe, but crossing the border just to get legalized weed because we don't have that here. And the argument has long been, why are we leaving that money on the table? But lawmakers have never got a bill together that would pass either of the chambers. So this did pass the House along party lines 102 to 101. It's going to the Senate, but it's pretty much dead on arrival. And it's not even because Republicans are in control, but it's because the stipulation in the bill is that the weed would be sold through the state-run stores like we do with our liquor. And there's a lot of opposition to doing it this way. We don't sell medical marijuana this way. And a lot of Republicans and Democrats don't want to see us do legalized weed this way either. They think that goes against the idea of giving more opportunity for small businesses to grow and to thrive. And they're saying we don't support the bill in its current form. So even though we have this landmark achievement for the House, it's deflated almost immediately because the Senate has no interest in taking it up.
Do you think that there is room for them to make amendments or draft something from what they have liked about this bill to get it across the finish line?
Certainly there is room, and even House Democrats acknowledged that this was not a perfect bill and that they expected changes from the Senate, probably in regards to that opposition to the state-run system. But that's a pretty huge component of the bill, so it stands to reason that it would need a pretty big rewrite in order to make the Senate happy. And even so, it's uncertain what would make Senate Republicans happy enough to actually pass legislation regarding this. There are some Republicans who are in favor of it in the Senate. Senator Dan Laughlin, who represents Erie, he has partnered with Senator Sharif Street from Philadelphia, a Democrat, and they've introduced legislation several years in a row that would legalize weed and have a decriminalization effort as this same proposal does. Their argument, again, is that we need to stop leaving money on the table. We need to set up our own regulation. We need to have our own market so that people aren't going to the black market where they're going to not understand the potency of the drug that they're getting, or even, is it laced with other sorts of drugs. That they see this as a safer alternative, particularly for younger people that they are worried about accessing the drug. There's a lot of concern that, marijuana is a gateway drug. Well, the argument here is that, again, we are controlling the quality of the marijuana that will be for sale. And so therefore that makes it safer. People are going to go get it however they want to, whether that's on the black market or crossing state lines. So the argument in favor is that we need to get in this and have more control over what is sold in Pennsylvania. That being said, Senate Republican leadership has not signaled any interest in doing this. They're focused on their other priorities. They passed a bill yesterday about banning transgender women in female sports. They are looking at school choice. Of course, they're going to want to be holding the line on spending in the budget coming up. So there's not really a conversation about legalization of weed. That being said, Governor Shapiro and House Democrats look at this as a way to raise money for the state and to pay for the things that they think we should spend money on, like public education, like mass transit. And so Senate Republicans are going to have to figure out a different way to balance the budget without that anticipated revenue.
Do they have any ideas for adding to revenue, or are they just more interested in cutting spending?
So one of the things that they actually want to do is another, what they would call sin tax, is legalizing skill games. Now, that is something that our Governor Shapiro supports too, but he has a very different idea for how much this skill game operators would be taxed, somewhere in the neighborhood of 52 to 54%, which is on par with the casinos, what they pay with slot machines. The skill game industry and the Senate Republicans who support it have been very vocal that this is an unrealistic tax that is essentially saying to the industry, we don't want you to exist, because, the idea that perhaps casinos don't want to lose any of their market share to skill games, which you will often find in gas stations. You can find them in American Legions, other kind of social clubs. This is something that a lot of small businesses rely on to help generate revenue, although it's certainly not the main source of revenue, and it certainly wouldn't be allowed to under any regulatory framework that we might adopt in the state. So for them, that's a moneymaker, but it seems unlikely that 16%, which is what Senate Republicans want, versus 52 to 54%, which Shapiro wants. Is there a middle ground there? Will they even come to the table on it to even discuss it? Remains to be seen. But at the end of the day, we're seeing these things shape up in time for the budget, which is due at the end of June. We're seeing these priorities start to shape up, and not every single one of them is going to be traded back and forth, but there are going to be some big ones. If I had to look into the future, I don't know that legalized weed, I don't know that this is going to be the year for it. But this progress that has been made in the House signals that we're on this path, that we're getting closer and closer. One day there will be legalized weed in the state, but will it be this year or next year or in 2028? Nobody knows.
Well, we'll keep following that to see if we catch up to our neighbors anytime soon. You can follow this story and more at thecentersquare.com/Pennsylvania, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.